In the distant future, humanity was not the most powerful force in the galaxy. The Galactic Empire had always been the dominant power, with a fleet of advanced ships and elite soldiers. They ruled the stars, and no one dared challenge their authority. Yet, when the war against the Xarthani invaders began, everything started to change. The Xarthani were fierce, relentless, and they were winning. Among the Empire's powerful ships, there was one that shouldn't have stood a chance: the Adventus. This ship wasn't new. It was old, barely held together, and was meant to be used only for training young cadets. It had no advanced weapons or shields like the Empire's flagship, the Aegis Dominion. The Adventus wasn't even supposed to fight. But then, the unexpected happened. Captain Elias Cruz was in charge of the Adventus, and he was unlike anyone the Empire had ever seen. He wasn't an aristocrat or a high-ranking officer from a noble family. He was a man from a humble background, someone who had worked his way up from nothing. His life had been about proving that humans could do anything, even when the odds were against them. He had an instinct for battle, an understanding of tactics that no computer or super-advanced alien ship could replicate. He believed in the power of human determination, and most importantly, he believed in his crew. The Adventus was the ship that everyone ignored. It had no new technology, no cutting-edge weapons, and no support from the higher-ups. While other ships in the fleet prepared for war, the Adventus was left behind, dismissed as irrelevant. But Captain Cruz knew something that others didn't. The Adventus didn't need to be the biggest or the most powerful ship. It only needed a captain who understood the value of every single crew member, a ship that could fight with heart instead of sheer force. And that was something the Empire's leaders and that Xarthani would soon realize. They had underestimated humanity. When the Xarthani launched a surprise attack, the Empire was caught off guard. The Aegis Dominion and the other powerful ships were too far away to reach the battle in time. Cruz knew that if humanity didn't act now, that Xarthani would sweep through the Empire's defenses without breaking a sweat. He had no choice but to take the Adventus into battle. The Adventus was small, and its weapons were weak, but Captain Cruz's belief in his crew and in himself was stronger than any weapon. The crew of the Adventus was not made up of the finest soldiers or most experienced warriors. They were mostly young cadets, nervous but eager to prove themselves. But Cruz wasn't worried. He knew that humans had something that Xarthani didn't have: an unbreakable will. And sometimes, that made all the difference. As the Adventus took off into space, Cruz's heart raced, but he didn't show it. He was ready. The ship that shouldn't win was about to make its mark. The battle would be fierce, and the odds were against them. But Captain Elias Cruz was certain of one thing: this wasn't just another ship. This was a symbol of humanity's ability to rise above and surprise the universe. The Adventus wasn't ready for war. It had never been meant for it. It was a training ship, used for teaching cadets how to be soldiers. But now, it was humanity's last hope. The Xarthani had attacked quickly, taking the Empire by surprise. The Aegis Dominion, the flagship of the Empire, was far away, and the Empire's fleet was scattered. Only the Adventus was close enough to fight. Captain Elias Cruz stood on the bridge, staring at the view of space. The vast emptiness was suddenly filled with danger. The Xarthani ships were closing in fast, their dark forms shadowing the stars. They had attacked a peaceful colony on the edge of the Empire, and now they were coming for more. Cruz knew that if they didn't act, that Xarthani would destroy everything in their path. Prepare for battle, Cruz ordered, his voice calm but firm. He didn't hesitate. He trusted his crew, even though they were young and inexperienced. He had always believed that humans could do more than anyone thought possible, and now he would show the universe just how much. The crew moved quickly, following Cruz's orders. The Adventus was small compared to the Xarthani warships, and its weapons were outdated. But Cruz had a plan. He knew that the Adventus couldn't take on the Xarthani head-to-head, but it didn't need to. The Adventus could fight smart. The Xarthani ships opened fire first. Their weapons lit up the blackness of space, bright and powerful. The Adventus shook as the blasts hit, but it didn't break. Kruz gripped the command chair, his eyes sharp as he watched the battle unfold. "Steady," he shouted. "We move fast. Hit them where it hurts." The Adventus dodged and weaved through the incoming fire. It was faster than the Xarthani ships, and Kruz used that to his advantage. He knew the Xarthani had powerful weapons, but their ships were slow. If he could outmaneuver them, he might just have a chance. "Target their engines," Kruz ordered. "Take out their ability to chase us." The crew worked together, their hands moving across controls. The Adventus fired its weapons, weak compared to the enemy, but Kruz had planned for that. Each shot was precise, aimed at the vulnerable parts of the Xarthani ships. One by one, the enemy ships began to slow down, their engines taking heavy damage. But the battle wasn't over yet. Another Xarthani ship, much larger than the others, moved in to attack. This ship was a real threat, its weapons far stronger than anything the Adventus had. Kruz knew they couldn't win in a direct fight, so he came up with another plan. "Get ready for a full-speed run," Kruz ordered, his voice steady. "When I say drop all speed and turn sharply, we'll make them follow us straight into the asteroid field." The crew looked at each other nervously but trusted their captain. They had no choice. They followed his lead, and the Adventus shot forward at full speed, racing toward the incoming enemy ship. The Xarthani ship followed, thinking it had the Adventus trapped. But Kruz had led them into the asteroid field, where the larger ship couldn't maneuver as easily. As the Adventus suddenly cut its speed and made a sharp turn, the Xarthani ship wasn't fast enough to adjust. It crashed into an asteroid, its engines exploding in a burst of fire. The Adventus had won. Against all odds, the ship that was never meant to fight had struck the first blow in the war. The crew cheered, their voices filling the bridge. Captain Kruz allowed himself a small smile, but he knew this was just the beginning. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. After the first victory, the Adventus became more than just an old training ship. It became a symbol. The Empire's leaders started to take notice, but not all of them were happy about it. The Adventus was still an underdog ship, and many high-ranking officials didn't like how Captain Elias Kruz and his crew were getting attention. They were afraid that the Adventus might become more powerful than the Empire's best ships. But Kruz didn't care about politics. He was focused on the war. The Xarthani were still out there, still attacking humanity's colonies. After the Battle of the Colony, Kruz knew that they couldn't rest. The Adventus was the only ship close enough to help, and Captain Kruz had no plans to back down. One day, as the Adventus patrolled a remote system, the ship received a strange message. It was from a group of rebels, human fighters who had split from the Empire years ago. They had their own ships and their own goals, but they were in trouble. The Xarthani were closing in on their hideout, and they needed help. Kruz wasn't sure what to do. These rebels weren't part of the Empire, and they didn't follow the Empire's orders. But Kruz knew one thing: humanity had to work together if they were going to win the war. So he made a decision. "Get us to that rebel base," Kruz ordered. "We help them, whether they like it or not." The Adventus arrived at the rebel base just in time. The Xarthani were already attacking. The rebels were outnumbered, and their ships were no match for the alien fleet. Kruz knew this wasn't going to be easy, but he also knew that the Adventus was the only ship that could make a difference. "We can't take them head-to-head," Kruz said to his crew, "but we can make them regret underestimating us." The crew worked fast, coordinating with the rebels. Kruz had no time to waste. The Adventus took to the skies, moving quickly and unpredictably, dodging Xarthani fire as it drew the enemy's attention away from the rebel ships. The rebels followed Kruz's lead, launching hit-and-run attacks on the Xarthani, who couldn't keep up with the sudden bursts of speed and clever tactics. Despite their smaller numbers, the rebels fought hard. Cruz saw the human spirit in them. They weren't as well trained as the Empire's soldiers, but they had something stronger: resolve. They were willing to fight and die for freedom, just like the crew of the Adventus. As the battle raged on, Cruz had a plan. He ordered the Adventus to take a dangerous risk. The ship would fly straight into the heart of the Xarthani fleet and cause as much chaos as possible. With the enemy distracted, the rebel ships could make their escape. The Adventus flew through the heart of the Xarthani forces, firing its weapons and throwing the enemy into confusion. Cruz and his crew worked together like a well-oiled machine. Every shot, every move was calculated to make the Xarthani question their confidence. When the last of the Xarthani ships were destroyed or driven off, the rebels cheered. Cruz had done the impossible again. The Adventus had proven its worth, and the rebels now saw humanity's true power. Cruz didn't want a victory celebration. He knew that this was just one battle in a long war. But something had changed. The rebels, once enemies of the Empire, now trusted the crew of the Adventus, and that trust meant something important. Humanity, united, was strong enough to fight back against any threat. The Adventus was no longer just a ship. It had become a symbol of hope, of everything humanity could achieve when they fought with their hearts and minds. Captain Elias Cruz had led the Adventus to victory after victory, and the crew had proven they were more than just a group of inexperienced cadets. But despite their success, trouble was brewing in the background. The higher-ups in the Empire were beginning to worry. They didn't like how the Adventus was stealing the spotlight. Cruz and his crew were becoming heroes, while the Empire's powerful warships, like the Aegis Dominion, were struggling to win. The Adventus had managed to take on the Xarthani, and every victory it won made the Empire's commanders feel more threatened. General Kale, one of the highest-ranking officers in the Empire, was especially worried. He had always believed in the strength of the Empire's elite fleet. The Aegis Dominion was the pride of the Empire, and its crew was the best humanity had to offer. But the Adventus, a ship meant for training, was getting the credit for victories that should have been earned by the Empire's finest. General Kale didn't like it. Cruz is starting to become a problem, General Kale muttered to his officers. The Adventus is getting too much attention. If we're not careful, he could overshadow the entire fleet. Kale wasn't the only one who thought that way. Many of the Empire's leaders feared that the Adventus and its crew were becoming symbols of something the Empire wasn't ready for, a new way of thinking. Cruz had always believed that human ingenuity, rather than expensive technology or powerful weapons, was what made humans truly dangerous. And that belief was starting to catch on, not just among the crew of the Adventus, but throughout the Empire. Meanwhile, Cruz was focused on the war, not on the politics of the Empire. The Adventus had just finished another successful mission, rescuing the colony from a Xarthani attack. But the crew was exhausted, and Cruz knew they needed rest. He had no idea that the Empire's leaders were already making plans to distance themselves from the ship and its captain. One evening, Cruz received an unexpected message. It was from Admiral Veran, one of the Empire's highest officials. She wanted to meet with him in private. Captain Cruz, Admiral Veran said in her cold, formal voice, "We need to talk about your ship and your future." Cruz wasn't sure what she meant. He had always followed the Empire's orders, but he had never been one to blindly follow the rules. "What about it, Admiral?" "The Adventus is doing too well," she replied. "It's causing a shift in the balance of power. The Empire's command structure is uneasy about your success." Cruz was quiet for a moment, thinking. He knew that his crew had earned every victory, but he also knew that the Empire didn't like to lose control. "What are you suggesting?" Cruz asked. "Your ship's success has brought attention, good and bad. The Empire is concerned that you're becoming too popular," she said, her tone still calm but firm. "There are plans to replace you, Captain. If you don't want that to happen, you need to stay in line." Cruz felt a cold chill. He had always fought for humanity, but now he was being warned to follow orders, to stop challenging the status quo. He wasn't sure what to do. The Adventus was his family, his responsibility. But was his loyalty to the Empire worth more than what he believed was right? "I'll do what I must," Kruz said finally, his voice steady. "But I won't stop fighting for humanity's future. And if the Empire can't see that, then I'll fight for it in my own way." Admiral Varen's expression didn't change. "Then you've made your choice, Captain." As the communication ended, Kruz stared out at the stars. He knew that this wasn't just about the Adventus anymore. It was about something bigger. Humanity was standing at a crossroads, and he had to choose whether to fight for a future where they were free to chart their own course or stay in the Empire's shadow. The message from Admiral Varen had shaken Captain Elias Kruz, but he wasn't about to back down. The Adventus was his responsibility, and he wasn't going to let the Empire control him or his crew. Kruz had always believed in the strength of humanity's spirit, and that meant more to him than following orders from leaders who didn't understand what he was fighting for. The next few days were filled with uncertainty. Kruz knew that the Empire's leaders were watching him closely, waiting for any sign that he might disobey. But Kruz wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing him falter. He had a mission to complete. That Exarthani were still attacking, and humanity needed him. However, there was something else weighing on Kruz's mind. The rebellion, the group of human fighters who had once split from the Empire, had been asking for his help again. They were fighting a losing battle, and without the Adventus, they might not survive. The Empire didn't care about the rebels. They saw them as traitors. But Kruz didn't see it that way. The rebels were still human, and their cause was just. The Empire's power wasn't the only path to victory. Humanity could win by standing together, not by fighting for one side or another. Kruz couldn't ignore the rebels' call for help, but if he went to them, the Empire would see it as an act of defiance. He was already walking a thin line with his superiors, and helping the rebels might be the final straw. Kruz knew that if he helped them, it might cost him everything. He called a meeting with his crew. The Adventus had become a family, and Kruz trusted them with his life. "We have a choice," Kruz said, standing before them in the command room. "The rebels need our help. They're facing another Xarthani attack, and if we don't act, they'll be destroyed. But if we go, the Empire will see it as treason." The crew listened in silence. Kruz could see the concern in their eyes. They all knew what was at stake. The Adventus was their only chance to make a real difference. They weren't just soldiers anymore. They were a symbol of what humanity could achieve if they worked together. Lieutenant Naomi Harris, one of the crew members, spoke up. "Captain, we signed up to fight for humanity, not just the Empire. We can't let the Empire decide who we help and who we don't." Kruz nodded, knowing she was right. "Exactly. This isn't about the Empire anymore. It's about doing what's right." The crew knew the risks, but they also knew that Kruz was right. The Adventus wasn't just a ship. It was a symbol of hope for all of humanity, rebels and Empire alike. They had to take a stand, no matter the cost. "I'll prepare the ship," Lieutenant Harris said, her voice firm. "We'll help them, Captain. We're with you." With the crew's support, Kruz made his decision. He ordered the Adventus to set course for the rebel base. The Empire would come after them, but Kruz was willing to face whatever consequences came. If the Empire didn't see the value in fighting for humanity's future, then he would fight without them. As the Adventus traveled through space toward the rebel stronghold, Kruz felt a strange sense of peace. He had made his choice, and there was no turning back. He was no longer just a soldier in the Empire's army. He was a leader, a symbol of what humanity could achieve if they stood together, no matter the odds. The Adventus approached the rebel base, and Kruz knew that the battle ahead would be their biggest challenge yet. The Exarthani were closing in, and time was running out. But Captain Elias Kruz was ready. He had made his decision, and he would fight to the end. The Adventus was heading toward the rebel base at full speed. The mission was dangerous, but Captain Kruz knew they had no choice. The Exarthani were closing in, and without the Adventus, the rebels didn't stand a chance. Cruz had made his decision, and now there was no turning back. As they approached the base, the crew began preparing for what was sure to be a fierce battle. The rebel fighters had already started their defensive positions, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. The Scifi forces were much stronger, and the rebel ships were barely holding up. The Adventus would have to make the difference. Status report. Cruz called out from the command chair. Rebel ships are in position, Lieutenant Naomi Harris replied. But they're already taking fire from the Scifi. They won't last much longer. Good. We'll make sure they get the help they need, Cruz said, his voice steady despite the pressure. We'll fly in fast, get their attention, and give the rebels a chance to fight back. Focus on the weak points of the Scifi ships. We don't need to destroy them all, just enough to make them retreat. The crew worked quickly, each member moving with purpose. They knew what was at stake. The fate of the rebels, and possibly the war, was in their hands. As the Adventus entered the battle zone, Cruz's heart pounded. The Scifi ships were massive, their dark forms filling the sky, but the Adventus was smaller and faster. Cruz's plan was to use their speed and agility to their advantage. The Scifi were slow and bulky. They wouldn't be able to keep up with the Adventus' unpredictable movements. The Adventus fired its weapons, taking out smaller enemy ships with quick, accurate strikes. The crew was working in perfect unison, dodging blasts and returning fire, but Cruz knew the real test was yet to come. The larger Scifi ships, the ones with the most powerful weapons, hadn't been engaged yet. Hold steady, Cruz ordered. We're going after their flagship. If we take that out, the rest will fall apart. The Adventus weaved through enemy fire, heading straight for the Scifi flagship. The ship was a giant, its weapons capable of tearing anything apart. But Cruz wasn't afraid. He had faced the odds before, and he was confident in his crew. Prepare for evasive maneuvers, Cruz shouted as the flagship's massive weapons locked onto them. The Adventus turned sharply, narrowly avoiding a blast that would have destroyed them. Cruz's heart raced, but he kept his focus. The crew followed his lead, working together as the ship danced around the larger enemy vessel. Now, Cruz shouted. The Adventus fired its main weapon, hitting the Scifi flagship directly in its weak spot, the engine. The ship exploded in a massive fireball, its destruction sending shockwaves through the battlefield. The Scifi forces reeled. With their flagship destroyed, they began to retreat, unsure of how to continue without their command ship. The rebel fighters took advantage of the chaos, launching their own attacks on the retreating enemy ships. The battle was turning in their favor. Victory is ours, Lieutenant Harris exclaimed as the Adventus flew alongside the remaining rebel ships, helping to mop up the remaining Scifi forces. Cruz felt a wave of relief wash over him, but he knew the war was far from over. This victory was important, but it was just one battle in a much larger conflict. The crew of the Adventus had proven once again that they could accomplish the impossible, but now they had to prepare for what was coming next. The battle with the Scifi had been a success, but Captain Cruz knew that their fight wasn't over. The Adventus and its crew had helped the rebels, but the war was far from won. The Scifi were still out there, and they were growing stronger every day. Cruz couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency. The Empire had refused to see the truth, and now humanity had to pay the price. As the Adventus made its way back to the Empire's space, Cruz received a disturbing message. It was from a former ally, someone he never thought he'd hear from again. Captain Cruz, we need to talk, the message began. It's about the Scifi, and something worse. Cruz listened closely. The voice on the other end was familiar, Admiral Varen, the Empire official who had warned him before. But this time, there was no coldness in her voice. There was fear. We've received reports that the Scifi are preparing for something big, Admiral Varen continued. A new weapon, something that could change the course of the war completely. We don't know much, But it's clear that the Xarthani are getting help from someone else. Someone, not human. Kruz's eyes narrowed. The Xarthani had always been a dangerous enemy, but the idea that they were getting help from an outside force was something entirely new. "We need your help, Captain," Admiral Varen said. "The Empire is willing to work with you, but this is bigger than anything we've faced before. If we don't stop it, everything we fought for will be lost." Kruz thought for a moment. He had never trusted the Empire's leaders, but this was different. If what Admiral Varen was saying was true, humanity was facing a threat far beyond what they had ever imagined. And Kruz knew one thing. He wasn't going to wait for the Empire to act. They had wasted too much time already. "We'll help," Kruz said firmly, "but we need information. Where do we start?" Admiral Varen paused, as if unsure of how to answer. "We found a lead. There's a research facility in the Virox system. It's isolated, but we believe it's where the Xarthani have been working on this new weapon. You're the only ship capable of getting there in time." Kruz didn't hesitate. "We'll set course for the Virox system immediately. Tell the Empire to prepare for a full-scale operation. We're going to need backup." As the Adventus prepared for another mission, Kruz gathered his crew. This time, it wouldn't just be a battle against the Xarthani. They were facing a new enemy, one that was working in the shadows, and Kruz had no idea who or what they were. But one thing was certain: the Adventus was going to stop them, no matter the cost. As the ship left the safety of the Empire's borders and entered uncharted space, the crew felt the weight of what lay ahead. They had faced the Xarthani before, but this time, they weren't just fighting an enemy. They were fighting something unknown, something that could change everything. Captain Kruz stood at the command chair, his mind focused on the task ahead. The Adventus had once been a ship meant for training. Now, it was humanity's last hope. The Adventus sailed through the dark, quiet space toward the Virox system. Captain Kruz stared out at the stars, his mind heavy with the mission ahead. He had faced many challenges before, but this one was different. The idea that the Xarthani had a new weapon, one they could not yet understand, filled him with a sense of dread. And worse still, someone was helping them. But who? And why? The crew was ready, but the uncertainty of what lay ahead made them all uneasy. Kruz had always believed in the power of human ingenuity, but this was something far beyond their knowledge. "Captain," Lieutenant Naomi Harris spoke up, breaking Kruz's thoughts. "We're approaching the Virox system. We've got no intel on what to expect there. The research facility could be heavily guarded." Kruz nodded. "We'll take it slow. First, we need to gather as much information as possible before we make any moves. No surprises." The Adventus slowed as they entered the Virox system. The stars looked different here, dimmer and more distant. It felt as though the universe itself was watching them, waiting. Kruz gave the order to deploy a scout drone, hoping to get a closer look at the research facility. It wasn't long before the drone returned with troubling news. "Captain, the facility is surrounded by a strong defense network," said Ensign Leo, one of the communications officers. "We're detecting several unknown ships in the area. They don't match any known Xarthani designs, but they're clearly hostile." Kruz clenched his fists. They've got backup. It's not just the Xarthani here. He turned to his crew. "We've faced bigger odds before, and we've won. This time, we'll do the same. But we need to be smart. No reckless attacks. We take them by surprise, and we keep moving." As the Adventus approached the facility, Kruz's mind raced. He had to act quickly. Time was running out. The unknown enemy could be hiding something that would change the course of the war. And if they didn't get there first, it could be too late. The crew worked with incredible focus. The Adventus dodged incoming enemy fire, using its agility to stay one step ahead. Kruz guided the ship carefully, avoiding the heaviest defense systems while slowly closing in on the facility. "We're almost there, Captain," Harris reported. "They've noticed us. It won't be long before they try to engage. Crews had expected this. We're going in fast, prepared to breach their outer defenses. With a deep breath, Crews gave the signal. The Adventus sped toward the facility, unleashing a series of calculated strikes on the defense grid. The enemy ships started to close in, but the Adventus was faster. Crews directed the ship through narrow channels and tight corners, using the facility's layout to his advantage. "Get us inside the facility," Crews ordered. "We'll finish this on the ground." With a final, powerful blast, the Adventus made a hole large enough for the ship to enter. Crews guided them through, landing near the facility's main entrance. The crew was ready. They suited up for what was sure to be a dangerous mission. They had no idea what they would find inside, but Captain Crews was certain of one thing. The battle for humanity's future was about to get even more intense. The Adventus's engines hummed as it settled on the surface of the research facility. Captain Crews led his crew through the airlock, the weight of the mission heavy on his shoulders. This was it, the heart of the mystery. Inside this facility lay the weapon that could change everything, and whoever was behind it could decide the fate of the entire war. Crews glanced at his team. Lieutenant Harris, Ensign Leo, and the rest of the crew were ready for whatever came next. They knew what they were fighting for: humanity's future. There was no turning back now. "Stay sharp," Crews said as he motioned for the crew to follow him. "We don't know what's waiting for us in there." The inside of the facility was dark and quiet, a sharp contrast to the chaos outside. The lights flickered as they moved deeper into the building, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The walls were lined with strange technology, things Crews had never seen before. He knew it was advanced, but there was something unsettling about the way it hummed and glowed. It felt wrong. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the intercom system. It was calm, but filled with authority. "Captain Crews," the voice said, "I've been expecting you." Crews froze. It wasn't that Xarthani. It wasn't even an enemy he had fought before. This voice was human. "Who are you?" Crews demanded. "I am Dr. Ilara Voss," the voice replied. "And I am the one who has been working with the Xarthani." Crews's mind raced. A human, working with the Xarthani. It didn't make sense. "I know what you're thinking," Dr. Voss continued. "You've been wondering why the Xarthani are suddenly so powerful, why they've been able to create such a deadly weapon. It's because of me. I've been helping them." "You're a traitor," Crews snapped. "Why would you do this?" Dr. Voss's voice didn't show any emotion. "I didn't start this war, Captain. The Empire did. They've been using humanity's resources for their own gain, sending us into battles that we never had a chance of winning. That Xarthani offered a better future. I did what I had to do to save us." Crews's heart pounded. "By helping them destroy humanity." "I'm trying to save humanity from itself," Dr. Voss replied. "If the Empire keeps going the way it is, there will be nothing left. The Xarthani's power will make sure of that. They will rebuild the galaxy, and humanity will thrive under their rule." Crews shook his head, disgusted. "You're wrong. You're only making it worse. Humanity can stand on its own. We don't need the Xarthani." The voice on the intercom laughed softly. "We'll see, Captain. We'll see who's right." With that, the lights in the facility flared to life, and the sound of the alarms began to blare. Crews knew it was too late. Dr. Voss had activated the weapon. The countdown to disaster had already begun. "Everyone, move," Crews ordered, sprinting toward the central control room. The crew rushed after him, but they knew time was running out. They had to stop the weapon. They had to stop Dr. Voss. The Adventus's crew fought their way through the facility, facing security drones and automated defenses. They pushed forward, determined to end this, even as the countdown ticked away. Finally, Crews and his team reached the control room. Dr. Voss was waiting for them, standing in front of the weapon, a large device that hummed with deadly energy. The countdown was almost finished. "Don't do this," Crews shouted. It's not too late. Dr. Voss turned to face him, her eyes cold. It's already done, Captain. There's no going back now. With one final push, Kruz and his crew disabled the weapon, shutting it down just in time. The countdown stopped. Humanity was saved. Dr. Voss was arrested, and the Adventus crew made their way back to their ship, victorious but shaken. The war was far from over, but today, humanity had won a critical battle. Captain Kruz looked out into the stars, knowing that the fight for humanity's future would continue.